The night was heavy with rain, the kind of storm that turned streets into rivers and wrapped every sound in static. Inside a modest apartment on the edge of the city, Clara Johnson, a woman in her mid-50s, clutched her chest as waves of pain and shortness of breath overtook her. She had battled high blood pressure for years, but tonight felt different, like the weight of an entire building pressing on her lungs. Her daughter-in-law, frantic and pale, called 911. By the time the paramedics arrived, Clara was barely able to stand. They rushed her onto a stretcher, the flashing red lights painting her face as the neighbors peeked out from behind curtains. "Stay with me, Clara," the paramedic whispered, fastening an oxygen mask. The ambulance door slammed shut, and with sirens piercing through the storm, they sped toward St. Mark's Medical Center, the city's largest hospital. The emergency room was crowded, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Nurses typed furiously at computer stations, while families huddled in corners, whispering prayers. As the doors burst open, the paramedics wheeled Clara in. Middle-aged female, chest pains, possible cardiac event. "BP unstable," one shouted. But instead of immediate action, the triage nurse barely looked up. Her eyes darted across the room, then back to Clara with a raised brow. "History of drug use?" she asked flatly. "No," the paramedic snapped. "She needs a doctor, now." The nurse sighed, typing lazily. "She'll have to wait. We're backed up tonight." The paramedic's jaw tightened, but he knew the drill. Without hospital authority, his words meant little. They left Clara in a wheelchair, clutching her chest, gasping for air, while other patients, some with far less urgent symptoms, were ushered in ahead of her. Clara tried to speak, her voice trembling. "Please? I can't breathe." The nurse barely glanced at her. "Ma'am, sit tight. We'll get to you when we can." Another staff member, a young resident, walked past, giving Clara a dismissive look. "She's probably exaggerating," he muttered under his breath. "They always do." The words stung more than the pain in her chest. Clara wasn't she wasn't a stereotype. She was a mother, a church volunteer, a woman who had worked 2 jobs to put food on the table. Yet here she was, treated as though her life didn't matter. Around her, the room buzzed with quiet chuckles. A man waiting with his daughter shook his head in disapproval, whispering something Clara couldn't make out. Another patient, an elderly woman with a sprained wrist, was escorted past her with warm smiles and reassurances. Clara's vision blurred, her body trembling. She wanted to scream, to demand dignity, but the words lodged in her throat. She closed her eyes, whispering a silent prayer. "Lord, don't let me die here like this." Moments later, the ER door swung open again and Marcus Johnson sprinted inside, her son a tall, composed man in his early 30s. Still in his work clothes, he had driven through the storm as soon as the call came in. His eyes darted across the crowded room until they landed on her. "Mom!" he shouted, rushing to her side. He dropped to his knees, holding her trembling hands. "What's happening? Why hasn't she been seen yet?" The nurse rolled her eyes. "Sir, you'll have to wait like everyone else. We're very busy tonight." "Wait? She's having a cardiac episode." Marcus's voice cracked with urgency. "Why isn't she in a bed? Why isn't she hooked up to a monitor?" The resident doctor, the same one who dismissed Clara earlier, approached with a smirk. "Look, we've seen this before. People come in claiming chest pain, trying to score attention, or something else. We can't bump others just because she's dramatic." Marcus froze, disbelief washing over his face. He looked down at his mother, gasping for breath, then back at the doctor. His voice was low, but it cut through the noise like a blade. "She's not being dramatic. She's dying." The room went quiet for a beat, tension thick as storm clouds. But the doctor only shrugged. "Sir, if you can't calm down, I'll have security escort you out." Marcus's fist clenched, his jaw tightening as rage and fear collided inside him. He wasn't just a son now. He was a witness to his mother's humiliation. And something deep within him told him this night would not end quietly. As Clara slumped further in her chair, her breath shallow and uneven, Marcus stood tall, his eyes locked on the doctor who had dared to dismiss her. "If my mother dies tonight," he said, voice steady but trembling with fury, "it won't just be on your conscience. It will be on the front page of every paper in the city." The room fell silent. Nurses paused mid-typing. Patients looked up, and for the first time, the arrogant doctor's smirk faded. The air in the ER seemed to freeze after Marcus's words. For a heartbeat, all eyes were on him. The exhausted nurses, the waiting patients, even the security guard leaning against the wall. But then the usual buzz returned, as though his threat had been swallowed by the fluorescent lights. The resident doctor cleared his throat. Sir, no one is denying her care. She just has to wait her turn like everyone else. Marcus tightened his grip on Clara's trembling hands. She's not everyone else. She's in cardiac distress. If she collapses, will you still tell me to wait my turn? The doctor crosses arms, defensive. We're trained to prioritize. We know what we're doing. Marcus's voice cracked with fury. No, what you're doing is play with her life because of what she looks like. A hush rippled across the waiting room. No one wanted to admit it, but everyone knew what Marcus meant. Clara tried to lift her head, her lips pale. Baby, don't fight them. Just pray. But Marcus shook his head, his chest heaving. No, Mom. Praying won't stop them from killing you slowly with neglect. He turned back to the staff, pointing at the nurse who had dismissed her earlier. Triage is about urgency, not convenience. You have patients with sprained wrists walking past her, while my mother is drowning in her own lungs. Explain that to me. The nurse's cheeks flushed red. Sir, lower your voice. You're disturbing other patients. Disturbing them? Marcus's laugh was bitter. My mother could stop breathing any second, and you're worried about disturbing people? At that moment, an older doctor, Dr. Patel, stepped out of the back hallway, his brow furrowed at the commotion. What's going on here? The resident quickly gestured. This man is being disruptive. His mother's case isn't urgent, but he insists we bump her ahead. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Not urgent. He pulled Clara's oxygen mask slightly aside to reveal her shallow, desperate breaths. Does this look like someone faking it to you? Dr. Patel's expression shifted immediately. His medical instincts overrode the politics. He knelt down, checked Clara's pulse, and frowned. She's tachycardic. Oxygen saturation is low. Get her on a monitor, now. The resident's face paled. But, Dr. Patel, no buts. Move. Nurses scrambled at the command, wheeling Clara into a treatment bay. Relief flickered across Marcus's face, but his anger didn't fade. It simmered, hot and unresolved. As they hooked Clara to machines, Marcus cornered the resident. His voice was sharp, almost shaking. You would have let her die, wouldn't you? You wrote her off before even touching her. The resident avoided his gaze. We see cases like this all the time. People exaggerating pain for narcotics. You can't blame me for being cautious. Cautious? Marcus spat. That's not caution, that's bias. You looked at her skin color and decided she was lying. The words hung heavy in the sterile air. The resident opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Meanwhile, Clara lay on the gurney, weak but listening. Every beep of the monitor echoed in her chest. She closed her eyes, ashamed, not herself, but a system that made her son beg for her life. Marcus took her hand again, lowering his tone. Mom, I swear to you, this isn't over. They'll remember what they tried to do tonight. Clara whispered, don't waste your strength on anger. Just make sure no one else suffers like this. Her words pierced him deeper than any insult from the staff. He nodded silent as tears pooled in his eyes. Moments later, Dr. Patel returned with the first test results. His face was grave. She's having a myocardial infarction, a heart attack. We need to stabilize her immediately. Marcus's heart sank, but his fury reignited. And you almost let her die in the waiting room because your staff thought she was faking. Dr. Patel didn't deny it. He simply said, she's in good hands now. Focus on her recovery. But Marcus wasn't satisfied. As nurses prepped Clara for emergency treatment, he pulled out his phone and began recording. He filmed the hallway, the waiting room, even a resident who now stood awkwardly against the wall. This, Marcus said into the camera, his voice low but fierce, is what medical neglect looks like. This is what happens when bias is stronger than duty. The resident raised his hands defensively. Sir, you can't film here. I can and I will, Marcus snapped. If my mother survives this, the world will know how close you came to killing her. As the medical team wheeled Clara into the cardiac unit, Marcus followed close behind, his phone still recording. The storm outside raged on, thunder shaking the hospital walls. But inside, another storm was brewing. A son's determination turned his mother's near death into a fight that would shake the entire system. The storm outside rumbled through the night. But inside the hospital, Marcus's phone camera captured a different storm, the kind that left scars long after the thunder stopped. He posted the video straight to social media. His voice shook as he spoke into the lens. My mother was left to die in a waiting room because the staff assumed her pain wasn't real. If Dr. Patel hadn't walked in, she wouldn't be here right now. This is the face of medical neglect. This is what bias looks like. Within minutes, the clip began to spread, first among his friends, then through hashtags, then further. Comments poured in, some angry, some heartbroken, some sharing eerily similar stories. By morning, the video had hit 50,000 views. Back in the hospital, Marcus refused to leave Clara's side. Machines beeped steadily around her, a fragile reassurance that she was still alive. She squeezed his hand weakly. Son, don't stir trouble. I just want peace. But Marcus shook his head. Mom, silence is what they count on. If I let this slide, how many other mothers will suffer the same thing? How many won't get their Dr. Patel to step in? Clara sighed, her eyes glistening with tears. I raised you to fight, yes, but I also raised you to forgive. Just don't let the fight consume you. Her words sat heavy in his chest, but Marcus couldn't ignore the fire burning inside him. The next day, the hospital's administration called him into a meeting. The chief medical officer, a stern woman named Dr. Whitaker, sat across from him. The resident who had dismissed Clara was nowhere in sight. Mr. Hayes, she began, folding her hands, we're aware of the video you posted. It's causing significant disruption. Marcus leaned forward, unflinching. The disruption isn't from me. It's from your staff leaving my mother to die. Dr. Whitaker's jaw tightened. We're conducting an internal review. In the meantime, we'd appreciate it if you removed the video. Marcus's laugh was bitter. You'd appreciate that? My mother almost had her life stolen, and you want it covered up so your reputation stays intact. Her tone sharpened. You're making serious accusations. If this escalates, it could damage trust in this hospital. Good. Marcus snapped. Maybe trust needs to be damaged if it wakes you up. The silence was thick. Finally, Dr. Whitaker sighed. We'll ensure your mother receives the best care possible. But I strongly advise you to think carefully about how far you push this. Marcus stood, his hands trembling, not from fear, but from rage barely contained. You don't get to advise me on anything. You had one job, protect patients. You failed. Later that evening, news stations picked up the story. The headline blared across screens. Man claims hospital neglected mother due to racial bias. Video goes viral. Marcus watched from his mother's room, his phone buzzing nonstop with calls and messages. Some were supportive, others threatening. Strangers wanted interviews. Activists wanted a story. Lawyers offered representation. Clara watched him pace the room. This is bigger than us now, isn't it? He nodded slowly. Yeah, Mom. It's not just about you anymore. It's about every patient who's been ignored, dismissed, or left to die because someone didn't believe their pain. The hospital struck back quickly. They released a statement claiming there was no evidence of neglect and that protocol was followed appropriately. They painted Marcus as an emotional son exaggerating circumstances. But Marcus had something they didn't. The footage, clips of the resident dismissing Clara, the nurse brushing her off, and Dr. Patel's urgent intervention were undeniable. Social media tore the hospital's statement apart. Still, the pushback was fierce. Online trolls flooded Marcus's inbox. Some called him a liar, others used slurs, and some even threatened violence. One anonymous message read, "Stop smearing good doctors. If your mom dies, it's on you." Marcus clenched his fist reading it, but Clara's frail voice stopped him from smashing his phone. "Don't give them your anger, son. Give them the truth. That's stronger." The turning point came when other families began sharing their own stories. Account of long waits, dismissals, and lost loved ones. A pattern emerged. People of color overwhelmingly at the center of these tragedies. The hashtag Believe Our Pain began trending nationwide. Marcus realized this wasn't just a fight for his mother anymore. It was a movement. But movements attract enemies. 2 days later, as Marcus walked to the hospital parking lot, he noticed a man in a suit waiting by his car. The man introduced himself as Mr. Lewis, a lawyer representing the hospital. "You're making powerful enemies, Mr. Hayes," he said coolly. "The kind that won't hesitate to ruin you." Marcus met his stare, unflinching. "If they can try to ruin my mother's life, they can try me too. But I won't stop." The man smirked. "We'll see." And with that, he handed Marcus a letter threatening legal action for defamation and harassment. Marcus stood in the rain-soaked parking lot, the letter trembling in his hand. Inside, his mother fought for her life. Outside, he now faced a different battle, against an institution determined to silence him. But what they didn't know was that Marcus had already made up his mind. This wasn't just a fight for justice. This was war. The hospital thought they could silence Marcus with a legal threat. Instead, they had just poured gasoline on a fire that was already burning. When Marcus shared the letter online, the response was explosive. The headline practically wrote itself. "Hospital threatens son who exposed neglect. Community outrage grows." What had started as a son protecting his mother now snowballed into a national conversation. TV pundits debated the case. Medical journals weighed in on racial bias in healthcare, and civil rights lawyers demanded accountability. By the end of the week, the story had millions of views across platforms. Inside the hospital, Clara's condition stabilized thanks to Dr. Patel's relentless care. He stood by Marcus, not just as a physician, but as an ally. "This isn't just about negligence," Dr. Patel told Marcus. "This is systemic. I've seen it before, but most families don't have the evidence you do. You have a chance to change things." Marcus stared at his mother, frail but alive, and nodded. "Then we won't stop here." The pressure mounted. Protesters gathered outside the hospital with signs reading "Patients before profits" and #BelieveOurPain. Reporters swarmed the entrance. Donors threatened to pull funding unless action was taken. Finally, the hospital board caved. Dr. Whitaker was forced to hold a press conference. Cameras flashed as she announced the suspension of the resident and nurse involved in Clara's neglect, and the launch of an independent review into discriminatory practices. But Marcus wasn't satisfied with the suspension. He wanted change that would last. With the help of civil rights attorneys, Marcus filed a lawsuit, not for money, but for policy reform. He demanded mandatory bias training for staff, new patient intake protocols, and a committee to oversee racial equity in care. The lawsuit dragged on for months. The hospital tried to stall, deflect, even discredit Marcus, but the court of public opinion was already against them. Every new delay only fueled more outrage. Meanwhile, Clara recovered slowly. She often told Marcus, "Don't forget to live your life, son. Don't let this fight steal it from you." He would smile, kiss her forehead, and say, "I'm living my life, Mom, by making sure no one else has to go through this." A year later, the hospital settled. The settlement included not only damages for Clara's suffering, but also sweeping reforms that became a model for other hospitals across the state. The resident who dismissed Clara lost his license. The nurse resigned under public pressure. And the hospital board quietly replaced Dr. Whitaker with someone new, someone who publicly committed to rebuilding trust with the community. On the day the reforms were announced, Marcus stood outside the hospital with his mother at his side. Reporters crowded around him, shoving microphones in his face. "What message do you have for other families who feel ignored?" one asked. Marcus looked into the cameras, his voice steady. "Don't stay silent. Don't let them convince you your pain doesn't matter. Because it does. My mother matters. Your loved ones matter. And when we raise our voices together, they can't ignore us." Clara gripped his hand tightly, pride shining in her tired eyes. Months later, Marcus returned to the hospital, not as a patient son, but as a guest speaker at New Equity in Healthcare Summit. Standing on stage, he shared his story with medical professionals, students, and policymakers. Behind him, projected on a giant screen, were the words, #BelieveOurPain. The audience gave him a standing ovation. For Marcus, the scars of that night would never fully heal, but they had been transformed into something larger, a movement, a reminder, and a legacy of strength. And as he helped his mother down from the stage, he whispered, "We did it, Mom. We turned their neglect into change." She smiled through tears. "No, son, you did it." This wasn't just about one mother, one son, or one hospital. It was about every person who has been dismissed, ignored, or silenced. And it proved that sometimes a fight for justice doesn't just save one life. It changes countless others.